trial today, and Luigi Mangione, accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, is demanding that his murder.
The liberty of the press is essential to the security of freedom in a state. That phrase wasn't written by a modern journalist. It was the principle that drove the acquittal of John Peter Zenger in 1735, when a colonial printer stood trial for the crime of publishing the truth. Nearly 3 centuries later, those words have landed inside a Manhattan courtroom, filed in a motion by a man who faces life in prison if convicted, and who is now demanding that the state turn the cameras on. Imagine a courtroom as a sealed box constructed entirely of one-way glass. The prosecution, the judge, and a handpicked pool of 68 journalists can see in. But the American public stands on the outside, staring at a reflection of themselves, told that this arrangement protects the defendant's right to a fair trial. The defendant in this box is Luigi Mangione, the 26-year-old charged with second-degree murder in the December 2024 shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a Midtown Manhattan sidewalk. And he is the one knocking on the glass from the inside, asking why the public cannot see what is being done in their name. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Courtroom Verdict Vault. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Mangione has pleaded.
That's right. For those who haven't heard, Luigi Mangione is charged with second-degree murder and some sundry of related offenses in the December 2024 shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a Midtown Manhattan sidewalk. He had pled not guilty and faces potential life sentences if convicted. Now, jury selection is scheduled to begin on September 8th before the Supreme Court Justice Gregory Caro. He is also facing.
Jury selection is scheduled to begin on September 8th before Supreme Court Justice Gregory Caro. He also faces separate federal charge expected to proceed in early 2027. He remains held without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Now, his attorneys have filed a motion requesting that the trial be broadcast live. Not a delayed transcript, not a courtroom sketch, a live feed. They object to the planned media rules that include no overflow courtroom and a reserve list for approximately 68 journalists. The defense argues that this process limits access in a manner that violates the constitutional right to a public trial. Let that sentence breathe for a moment. The prosecution has not formally opposed the broadcast request. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has taken no formal position at all. The silence is a void where an argument should be.
That violates the constitutional rights of a public trial. The lawyer asked the court to either allow a live broadcast or explain why it will not permit such broadcast, and that they requested a live overflow feed within the courthouse, plus a public hearing on how the selected reporters were chosen. Live cameras are generally prohibited in New York State court, as well as federal court, under rules designed to protect the defendant's right to a fair trial. Overflow arrangements have been used in some high-profile cases in the past, obviously, and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has not taken a formal position on the broadcast request.
New York State court rules generally prohibit live cameras, a restriction designed to protect defendants from spectacle. The irony here has a physical weight. The person those rules were written to protect is now asking for them to be removed. The defendant wants you to watch. The system says no. And so we arrive at the phrase that turns this from a legal filing into a philosophical standoff. Light disinfect.
Ruled. Now, this request brings us directly to our legal history of the day. On August 4th, 1735, the landmark seditious libel trial of New York printer and journalist John Peter Zenger opened in New York City. Zenger had been charged for publishing criticism of the colonial governor. His defense, led by Andrew Hamilton, argued that the truth should be a defense against libel charges. The jury acquitted Zenger, establishing an important early precedent for freedom.
Let me give you the parallel narrative that makes this moment historically legible. On August 4th, 1735, the seditious libel trial of John Peter Zenger opened in New York City. He had been charged with publishing criticism of the colonial governor. His defense attorney, Andrew Hamilton, argued a radical proposition that the truth should be a defense against libel charges. The jury acquitted Zenger. That verdict did not merely free a printer. It laid an early foundation stone for the First Amendment. Now, almost 300 years later, in the same legal lineage, a defendant in a murder trial is making the same demand: let the public see the evidence.
Justice Gregory, Caro. He is also facing separate federal charges that are expected to begin in early 2027. He is being held without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, which is a federal detention facility there. In recent court filings, Mangione's attorneys have requested that the trial be broadcast live and that the measures be taken to expand media and public access. They object to the planned media rules that include no overflow courtroom and a reserve list for approximately 68 journalists, and argue that the process limits access in a manner that violates the constitutional rights of a public trial.
Let them judge whether the process is clean or corrupted. The tension between the right to public access and the right to a fair trial remains the unresolved argument of the American experiment.
The truth should be a defense against libel charges. The jury acquitted Zenger, establishing an important early precedent for freedom of the press in America and influencing later First Amendment principles. Now, nearly 3 centuries later, Mangione's defense team is arguing for maximum public access to a high-profile murder trial. Obviously, the tension between the right of the public to see the trial and the right to a fair trial remain.
This is where the ticking clock begins. What happens if Justice Caro denies the motion and the trial proceeds inside the sealed box? What happens to the public record of a case that has already generated a parallel narrative entirely outside the courtroom? A narrative shaped by fragments, leaks, and ideological projection. When official information is rationed, unofficial information fills the void. The question is no longer whether this trial will be broadcast. The question is whether the trial that matters will happen inside the courtroom or outside it, on platforms where evidence has no rules of admissibility and cross-examination does not exist. That is the thriller element buried inside a procedural motion. This is not about cameras. This is about who controls the story.
I think cameras should be in every courtroom for every minute that the court is in session, so that everybody has a right to see what's going on. The public has a right to see what's going on. And in today's world, why do we not use technology so that everybody can see if the prosecution is acting righteously, or is the defendant getting screwed by either not having effective representation, the prosecutor acting unethically, or maybe they're doing everything great, and is the judge being fair and impartial to both sides, calling balls and strikes? Who would have a problem with that? It's like all things in life, ladies and gentlemen, right? Light disinfects. You can see the little cockroaches run when the cameras go away. Turn on the light, watch the cockroaches run.
And so we return to the refrain that now echoes through this case like a closing argument not yet delivered. Light disinfects.
Life, ladies and gentlemen, right? Light disinfects. You can see the little cockroaches run when the cameras go away. Turn on the light, watch the cockroaches run. People should want.
In a world where every street corner is under surveillance, where government buildings are monitored by flock cameras, where the private sector tracks your purchasing patterns and your location data, the one place the state insists must remain dark is the room where it exercises its power to take away liberty or life. Light disinfects. You can see the little cockroaches run when the cameras go away. The people who fear transparency are not the people who trust the system. They are the people who depend on the system's opacity to survive. Now, here is the call to research that you will not hear anywhere else. Go to the New York State Unified Court System's public docket portal. Search for the Mangione filings under indictment number 2024-04501 in New York County Supreme Court. Read the defense motion for live broadcast yourself. Do not rely on summary articles. Do not trust the paraphrase. Read the actual legal argument, the citations to constitutional law, the specific language about the reserve list of journalists.
Today. Question: what poses the greatest risk to a fair trial? Too much public access and live cameras, or too little transparency? Or Turning to the mental health cases we've examined today, can severe mental illness ever fully erase criminal responsibility? Let me know in the comments. I think the greatest threat to liberty is no transparency. All right, particularly when it comes
Share this video with someone that still believes that what happens in a courtroom is boring. Like and subscribe to Courtroom Verdict Vault. Hit the bell. These filings are public, but analysis that traces their historical roots and their constitutional stakes. That is what we build here. The Constitution matters, and whether this trial is broadcast live or buried behind a reserved list of 68 journalists will tell you exactly how much it matters to the people holding the gavel.
Gentlemen, that is Crime Talk for August 4th, 2026. We hope you enjoyed the show. Obviously, the Clancy trial continues. The Siders competency motion is pending, and the Clancy's plea hearing in August 10th, and the jury selection will begin soon for Luigi Mangione. We will be covering every new development. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. And remember, the Constitution matters.